morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and today another detailed forecast update coming your way. We've got a lot of talk about thunderstorms coming up, southeastern Queensland, northeastern New South Wales, squall lines, supercells, you name it, we are going to be talking about it. And we're going to be talking about the tropical weather scene as well, and we're also going to be talking about a potential heatwave for Western Australia. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast, and we're just very close to 20,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I thank you for doing so in advance. I mean, take a look at this. Later on Thursday afternoon and evening, under the influence of this low pressure system, we get an outbreak of severe thunderstorms. And when I say an outbreak, I mean a nasty line of them is expected to materialize across parts of southeastern Queensland. So nasty indeed that I've re-recorded this entire section of video and put it at the front of the video just to make sure that this is front and center, because this actually impacts quite a lot of people. Now, I know I'm sounding very alarmist here. If you heed all the warnings and make sure that you are inside and out of harm's way from these severe thunderstorms, they present a very little risk to your safety. They still do with the large hailstones that we're expecting, potentially damaging winds, and of course the risk of tornadoes. It's not a high risk, but it is still a risk of tornadoes for some locations across southeastern Queensland. They could be classed as damaging severe thunderstorms. It's certainly something that I would like to talk about right now. And take a look at this. I mean, taking a look at the forecast models here from the Axis G3, and this is at the worst hour as well, at around 2 or 3 a.m. local time. We get this line of severe thunderstorms expected to materialize south of the Brisbane area, outside of the Gold Coast and into the southern suburbs of Brisbane, and then further out inland towards Toowoomba and Warwick. We're expecting these thunderstorms to develop, and then creeping forward into the Brisbane metro area later on Thursday afternoon into Friday, Thursday night into early Friday morning. I mean, you take a look at this at around 3 or 4 a.m. on Friday. We're expecting a line of powerful severe thunderstorms to move through with the full 9 miles in terms of impact. We're expecting heavy rainfall, large hailstones, damaging and locally destructive winds, and of course that risk of tornadoes as well. Microbursts also look possible, especially later on into the morning at around 3 or 4 a.m. as these thunderstorms do kind of collect together around the southern suburbs of Brisbane and then into the northern suburbs of the Gold Coast. Coomera is one that really sticks out that could get some pretty gnarly impacts from these thunderstorms. The risk of these thunderstorms combining into very high precipitation squall modes and having rainfall rates of around 100 to 150 millimeters an hour, that of course presents a risk of microbursts, which is a very isolated and very heavy downpour of rainfall that can cause substantial flash flooding and some significant impacts to some of these locations. Damaging wind gusts in excess of 110 kilometers an hour look possible. Hailstones between 3 and 5 centimeters also look possible, just considering the very favorable environment and the amount of lift and instability in the atmosphere, which means those hailstones are going to have plenty of time to collect more and more weight and size in the clouds. It's going to be an interesting one indeed. And yeah, certainly some gnarly impacts are expected from these thunderstorms. The risk of tornadoes also, it is there, but it isn't anything really worth panicking about at this time. There's not much you can do in the way of a tornado. I wouldn't recommend, I definitely wouldn't recommend driving away from one if you do see a hook echo heading your way on radar. And in fact, most of the time, I think it's 3/4 of the time, a hook echo on radar doesn't indicate a tornado. Tornadoes, of course, have to have that hook echo to really be obvious on the radar imagery, but most of the time it's just a rotating thunderstorm on the radar that has presented a hook echo. So I would not be panicking just by looking at the radar and seeing a hook echo coming your way. Your biggest threat right now is, of course, the rainfall leading to flash flooding and the large hailstones doing damage to your car. So put your car inside, your outdoor furniture strapped down and out of harm's way. Get yourself inside and just buckle up for some pretty gnarly thunderstorms moving through. I think for most people this is going to be more exciting than it will be problematic. I don't reckon these are going to be classed as damaging or destructive severe thunderstorms, but they certainly will make the news in terms of strength. This is kind of the outbreak that we expect to experience about 5 times in a year, so certainly on the stronger end of what is expected. But anyway, so let's head further up the Queensland coastline and rejoin up around the Emerald and Dingo area and talk about what's happening in the afternoon as opposed to what's happening Thursday night and Friday morning. This is at midday Australian Eastern Standard Time. We've already got a couple of blobs of thunderstorms here south of Rolleston, outside of Injune and Taroom. Now, these thunderstorms you've got to be watching very closely, specifically on the eastern side of things, on the southeastern side of things. These storms could get quite nasty indeed. They continue to blow up throughout the early afternoon hours. By around 2 p.m, we're likely got severe thunderstorms on the radar here, just outside of Injune. Take a look at this here. I know this forecast isn't picking up exactly where the thunderstorms are going to, but it's given a pretty good guess at this time, and we will be seeing non-severe thundercells in this general area, pretty much to the exact same degree that this forecast model is suggesting here. Now, how I interpret this data here is when we start to see reds, you can get some pretty nasty thunderstorms, most likely non-severe, but you can still get some nasty thunderstorms coming through. When you see these purples and then eventually onwards from that blacks on this forecast, you've definitely got severe thunderstorms on your hands. And we do have a pretty widespread expanse of potentially severe thunderstorms by the looks of things through Thursday night. We get a second blob of thunderstorms and potentially severe ones fire up at around 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time outside of or just north of Chinchilla up towards Taroom and Theodore. And this is just inland from Hervey Bay, Bundaberg and Gladstone. You can see Bundaberg over here and these thunderstorms firing up in this area outside of Gympie, actually on the Sunshine Coast. It looks like these thunderstorms do give the majority of the Sunshine Coast a miss, but once they get themselves over to the ranges, it looks like they continue to fire up more thunderstorms as well later on into the afternoon and into the early evening hours. And you can see potentially severe ones expected outside of Mount Perry and outside of Bundaberg at this time. This is at 5 p.m. Later on in the afternoon and evening, we're expecting these storms to consolidate from pulse thunderstorms or potentially supercell thunderstorms. The supercell risk, we'll get to that in just a second, but later on in the afternoon these storms will all combine into what will probably look like a giant squall line on radar, stretching up from Emerald right down towards Hervey Bay. The bulk of the squally conditions will be around the sort of Mount Perry, Bundaberg sort of area before heading for the coast at around 7 or 8 p.m. Now, the reason why this forecast goes AWOL on the rainfall, and there's a lot of rainfall on the forecast later on in the afternoon, is because it is a squall line system. Squall lines have the straight line damaging wind threat where you can see wind gusts. From this thunderstorm, I would be expecting wind gusts up above 110 kilometers an hour for exposed locations, and winds averaging between 60 and 80 kilometers an hour, and of course the rainfall rates as well, where we could be seeing rainfall rates top 75 millimeters an hour, and depending on how long this squall line lasts for or how fast moving it is, we could be seeing rainfall accumulations around this area up towards that 50 or 75 millimeter mark, probably nothing higher than 75 millimeters. That's a really wet thunderstorm, even for the central Queensland coastline, but I do still reckon we're going to get some pretty high rainfall accumulations on Thursday night, especially around Bundaberg and Gladstone. The highest precipitation totals will be in some of the mountainous areas outside of Bundaberg and Gladstone up towards Rockhampton. If I was to put a name on some locations, it would be around the Mount Perry or Miriam Vale area. I don't think this is a very remote part of Queensland. There's a lot of people that do live in this area as well, so you definitely should be taking this forecast quite seriously. We're expecting thunderstorms as well down towards Hervey Bay as well, potentially severe as well with damaging winds. However, I don't think the heavy rainfall threat is going to be there, and thunderstorms not likely to be severe or even present for that matter south of about Rainbow Beach. Definitely not down deeper into the Sunshine Coast such as Maroochydore or Noosa, for example. Now further up the coast as well, outside of Rockhampton and Gladstone up towards Emerald and Claremont, we still do have thunderstorms continuing through the night. Now they are expected to be a little bit more sporadic, fewer and far between, and I don't reckon it's going to develop into an all-out squall. I just think it's going to be a couple of pulse thunderstorms tracking over parts of Queensland around the Emerald and Claremont area, which means the rainfall is going to be a lot lower for a lot of these locations and a lot harder to predict. By around 10 p.m, we're expecting these thunderstorms to enter the Rockhampton and Ogmore areas. They would have reached Agnes Water and Gladstone a little bit earlier than that, if I haven't said, but you can see as we get up towards the Wide Bay area, the thunderstorms do start to peter out and dwindle in terms of intensity later on Thursday afternoon and evening, and you can see making it up towards Mackay and those sort of areas as well, a couple of showers and thunderstorms just inland, but those thunderstorms pretty much all but petering out by around midnight, and I don't think it's going to get itself up towards Mackay, and definitely not up towards the Whitsundays or anything. So for locations between Ogmore down towards about Hervey Bay, including Bundaberg, Agnes Water, Gladstone, Rockhampton and Ogmore, I do expect some pretty nasty thunderstorms to move through the area, specifically around that Miriam Vale, Gladstone, Agnes Water and Bundaberg area later on tomorrow afternoon and into the early evening hours. The main risk there is going to be squall modes, which are those high precipitation, windy thunderstorms that blow through. Down towards Rolleston and Injune later on in the afternoon, we are expecting those supercell thunderstorms to have a good run at firing up, and that's all going to be powered by very warm temperatures and a lot of instability in the environment. I mean, take a look at the temperatures across parts of central Queensland, well above 40 degrees for some locations, out towards Muttaburra and Winton, 41 degrees expected there, and the temperatures are going to be very high for parts of central Queensland as well into the afternoon and evening hours, high 30s and early 40s unless there are thunderstorms in the area, in which case those temperatures will drop substantially. Favourable winds as well, favourable mid-level humidities, favourable convective available potential energy values as well. I mean, just take a look at this, a huge amount of energy for thunderstorms to make the most of outside of Taroom I'd be very surprised if we didn't see supercell thunderstorms tomorrow, and of course that brings the risk of tornadoes. As with every thunderstorm outbreak across Queensland, or every nasty thunderstorm outbreak across Queensland, there is always the chance of tornadoes, but I reckon tomorrow we do have a higher than average chance of tornadoes for some of these thunderstorm outbreaks, so especially if you live around the Injune or Rolleston area, make sure you are watching out very closely, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a weak tornado spin up around the Bundaberg or Agnes Water area as well. And when I say weak, I do mean weak. I mean, we're not expecting winds to exceed about 120 kilometers an hour, which can start to cause some problems. Still, though, it will pack a punch when these thunderstorms do move through, especially if you are under a severe thunderstorm warning. It's just much safer to stay inside and out of the weather. Definitely not on the roads and definitely not walking around. I think that goes without saying. And especially with the risk of tornadoes and potentially large hailstones to some locations tomorrow, I think it would be a very good idea to have a quiet night inside watching these thunderstorms roll through. So, in terms of New South Wales as well, we did talk about this yesterday. An outbreak is expected across the northeast of New South Wales, specifically around the Barrington Tops, Taree, Newcastle sort of area, just outside of Forster. In fact, you can see some thunderstorms expected to blow up in the afternoon and evening hours at about 7 p.m. local time. We are expecting these thunderstorms to potentially be severe across some locations, especially outside of the Forster area, and then further up the coast as well, outside of Coffs Harbour and Grafton, some potentially severe thunderstorms are also expected. Supercell thunderstorms are unlikely, but still possible outside of Newcastle, just considering the favourable environment that these storms will find themselves in. I reckon the temperatures might just be a little bit too cool for really big thunderstorms to blow up here, and it might just be a little bit too close to the coastline as well for really big thunderstorms to again blow up there. Pulse thunderstorms further inland out towards Lightning Ridge, Narrabee, Moree as well, some pulse thunderstorms expected out there, most likely non-severe, but a couple of cells could go severe, certainly something worth keeping an eye on. But again, just back to southeastern Queensland, this has kind of taken me by surprise. You can see here later on Thursday night, these thunderstorms really do fire up in pretty dramatic fashion outside of Toowoomba, Brisbane and the Gold Coast. If you are planning on being awake for these systems, most likely between the hours of around 2 to 3 or 4 a.m. on early Friday morning, it's certainly going to be a bit of a wild one for some of these locations, and I do actually expect the risk of large hailstones, very heavy rainfall in some locations, a lot of lightning is expected, and some damaging winds as well. There is a risk of tornadoes, as with, like I said, pretty much every supercell thunderstorm outbreak across southeastern Queensland at this time of the year, but I reckon it's sufficiently low enough at this time to really not worry about it. And again, tornadoes are incredibly isolated weather events, so there's really nothing you can do about them when they do spin up. Just make sure you are staying inside in a weather event like this, and you should be, for the most part, all good. Tornadoes still can cause damage, but they're unlikely to be dangerous if you are inside your own house. Anyways, that basically does it for the thunderstorms across southeastern Queensland. Definitely something that I want to talk about much further in depth tomorrow. I will make the best effort to make a video update tomorrow covering these thunderstorms as well. It definitely looks like we've got a pretty wild outbreak for Queensland and even in towards New South Wales as well over the coming couple of days, well, next 24 hours basically. And then also into this weekend, we do have a bit of a thunderstorm event expected across parts of southern Queensland and into the northeast of New South Wales, specifically Sunday afternoon and evening. We're expecting a weak low pressure system and a surface trough to sweep across the Queensland area and into parts of New South Wales, and some thunderstorms are expected to fire up around, you guessed it, Injune, Roma and south of Rolleston, that sort of general area there, the Queensland thunderstorm alley. Now these thunderstorms, specifically on the southern side towards the New South Wales and Queensland border, are expected to be not as strong as regular thunderstorms, just a couple of showers expected there, maybe the odd lightning strike here and there, definitely no large hailstones, damaging winds or anything like that. But for locations north of St George up towards Roma, Injune and Rolleston, we could be seeing some stronger thunderstorms later on Sunday afternoon and evening. Definitely nothing as strong as what we're going to be seeing tomorrow afternoon and evening, but certainly some strong thunderstorms are possible. And then later on to the night as well, you can see a bit of thunderstorm outbreak expected outside of Rolleston and Dingo and Emerald, that sort of area. Typical for this time of the year, that's for sure, that goes without saying, but again, we could be seeing a couple of strong storms there. And also the heads up Sunday afternoon, a few strong storms expected outside of the Toowoomba area, mostly showers and rainfall expected for Brisbane and the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast, but we will keep a very close eye on things. The forecast still a little bit hazy with this thunderstorm outbreak, and those storms continuing into Monday as well for parts of central Queensland's coastline, and then showers persisting for parts of Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday next week for parts of southeastern Queensland and into central Queensland as well. Weather scene very interesting across Queensland right now, certainly something we're going to talk much more in depth about. If I can't get around to making a forecast update tomorrow, I will release one tonight. I'm hoping to make a very detailed forecast update on these thunderstorms for tomorrow, because it certainly is going to be a powerful outbreak. Make sure you are staying on top of the Bureau of Meteorology's warning page as well. It's going to be packed with information tomorrow about these thunderstorms, and it could get quite overwhelming as well. If anything, if you lose track of all the information from the Bureau of Meteorology, just have a look at the radar imagery. If you're looking at heavy rainfall coming your way, that does mean strong thunderstorms. But again, these thunderstorms, they're not expected to be dangerous if you take necessary precautions. No thunderstorm in Australia is necessarily dangerous if you take the precautions properly. So staying inside, removing outdoor furniture that's likely to be blown around, moving that either inside or into an enclosed area, putting your car inside a garage, you're very unlikely to receive very nasty impacts from thunderstorms in Australia. So again, stay calm during a weather event like this. I know a lot of this stuff, strong thunderstorms and whatnot, that can sound a little bit alarming, but they are going to be strong thunderstorms. They're certainly going to pose that risk. But like I said, if you take all of the necessary precautions, you're very unlikely to be found in harm's way. Now, in terms of the tropical weather update for parts of northern Australia as well, it's same old rainfall continuing to pile up across parts of northern WA from those thunderstorms, and even into the Northern Territory as well. We're starting to get some solid showers and storms firing up there. We've had a jump in the rainfall for parts of far northern Queensland for the next 10 days as well, from the other couple of forecasts that we've been looking at, and again, this monsoon trough creeping further and further south. Certainly something that's going to result in some rainfall continuing to pile up there over the next 10 days, and it looks like the rainfall is not too far away. The real rainfall, where we're talking about 200 or 300 millimetres in a 7-day period, is not too far away for parts of northern Queensland. It is starting to get quite interesting indeed, this forecast really starting to kind of build for the wet season, and it is exciting, and I imagine for rainfall lovers across parts of far northern Queensland, it is also really exciting to see. Unfortunately, however, we just haven't had enough time for the rainfall to dry out parts of far northern Queensland. They are starting to get a little bit dry up across the Atherton Tablelands and that sort of area outside of Cairns. They're really starting to dry out there, so some rainfall would be very welcome, and it is on the way sometime in the next 10 days. We'll break it down in greater depth in another forecast update, however, because it is sort of more 5 to 10 day forecast period. But unfortunately for the Cassowary Coast and parts of the Daintree, which struggled from flooding last year, look to be another hot zone for flooding this year, just considering how wet the soil moisture values are there right now. It is a little bit concerning indeed. And another thing that I would like to talk about is a heat wave that's expected to develop across parts of Western Australia. We're expecting warm temperatures into next week, and potentially Perth's first 40-degree day at some point into next week. Temperatures are going to rise today as well. We're expecting a nice top of about 20 degrees in Perth. That's pretty warm, but not nothing compared to what we are expecting over the coming couple of days. In fact, it's going to be a little bit warmer than that in Perth, a nice sunny top of 22. Tomorrow it's going to be warmer than that, up towards 25 and well in towards the mid-20s and early 30s for parts of the Wheatbelt, as well as these temperatures really build across the Kimberley and into the Pilbara region as well. You can see on Friday we're expecting a blistering top of around 44 for a lot of locations across parts of the Kimberley and into the Gascoyne as well. Temperatures well above 40 degrees into parts of the Gascoyne, and even down in towards the Murchison as well. Outside of Meekatharra, we're expecting some warm temperatures. Saturday, things do cool down a little bit across the south, but temperatures very warm across the north along the WA coastline outside of Port Hedland. Temperatures into the mid-40s for the first time this summer. Temperatures continuing into the low to mid-40s as well throughout Sunday, Monday, and then into Tuesday when this heat builds once again. You can see Tuesday, a top of 35 expected for Perth as this west coast trough slowly develops. And then Wednesday, we were talking about this being the hot day. You can see at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, Perth, it is still not hot. It's a very warm 35, but I wouldn't class this as hot for Perth by any stretch of the imagination, even for this time of the year. But further up the coast, outside of Jurien Bay and Lancelin, it is getting close to 40 degrees and very warm into the Murchison as well. Early 40s there, and then into the early to mid 40s for parts of the Pilbara and the Kimberley region. I also need to preface this by saying that early to mid 40s of the Kimberley and the Pilbara, even for this time of the year, that's not hot. That's pretty stock standard. But once we start tickling 40 degrees across parts of the Murchison and even into the Wheatbelt as well, which is what we're going to be doing for this time of the year, that is substantially warmer than average, and certainly something worth mentioning. Warmer still on Thursday, up towards 39 for Perth. Very warm indeed to close out October, and then the first day of November, a little bit of reprieve as a westerly flow kicks in, but still very warm across parts of interior WA, up towards 41 degrees expected there across parts of the Wheatbelt and into the Murchison district once again. So it is going to be very warm, but I would take the forecast beyond Wednesday with a little bit of, with a heavy pinch of salt actually, just considering the variability of these west coast troughs. But definitely expecting a warm streak next week, that's for sure. Whether it's going to last 3 days or 5 days, still out for the weather models to decide, but we will keep a close eye on things across Western Australia, and I know a lot of people itching for some true warm days to hit to the beach and to just enjoy the sun, really, because we have had a reasonably long winter and conditions are still pretty cold. It was a cold morning across parts of Western Australia today, so some warm temperature will be very welcome across parts of WA, especially into Perth. It has been a very long forecast update. I'm sorry that I've struggled to summarise everything in greater detail in this forecast update. We had a lot to get through with Queensland and New South Wales. If you feel like I've left anything unanswered or I've left you confused about something, then please do let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for watching the video to this point. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. The list keeps on growing. Again, we're getting very close to 20,000 subscribers, so if you haven't subscribed, please do consider subscribing. The support lately has been much appreciated, but that is all from me, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.